And so I just wanted to do an emotional check-in. This is a link to a word cloud, and I feel like it would be nice to just kind of see how we're all feeling as a whole on one screen, which we might not be able to see because of the sun. But if you use your cell phones and go to menti.com and type in the code 430-12789. I think you can enter in up to 3 words. I don't think it has to be just 1 word if that's
Wi-Fi password is capital B, beach, at, symbol, Avalon, me, exclamation point.
Thank you.
And it's the public, public something.
It should start showing itself as people enter in. This is the first time I'm doing it, so it might not work, but I just wanted a way for it to be interactive with the folks doing virtual as well, that they can enter in that information. And then we can also, if people want to share too, that would be great as well.
So it's 430-12789.
It's the code to get in on the word cloud. Yeah. It's 430-12789. All right. Yeah, we got some words up there. All right, I see shocked, scared, optimistic, discouraged, disheartened, eager, sad. I just kind of get these like the snippets of the words as like in this stripe of shade.
Scared and anxious.
Yeah, exhausted.
Privileged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing like verbally how they're feeling? Hot and bothered. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of ups and downs, maybe some sideways. Mm-hmm.
Exhausted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I think, yeah, anxious is up there. Yeah, is that how you're feeling?
Determined.
Determined, yeah. Angry. Yeah. Pissed off. Yeah, angry and angry plus. Yeah. Privilege. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone feel all of those things at once? Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'll let these keep coming in, and maybe we can take a look back after the presentation too. But thanks for participating. I mean, all of those things, definitely expected responses, I think, in something with regard to the climate crisis. This is a taxonomy of like, I think just like a range of what people normally feel with climate change. And it's kind of, I don't know how much you guys can see, but it's kind of divided into fear and grief. And there's definitely a lot of overlap in between. I think a lot of these emotions, anger, rage, sadness, dread, definitely fall within what we saw in the word cloud. And something I didn't see was denial, which is sandwiched right there between fear and grief, and it's like where the sun is hitting it. So I don't know if you guys can see, but that's I probably not what I would expect from this activist group, but we definitely see that as well with a lot of the general population, even among my colleagues as well, where it's just too big of an issue to face and confront that they kind of have to ignore it or just like completely shut down. Yeah. And then in this corner here that you cannot see, there's this term called solastalgia. Has anyone heard of this term before? Solastalgia? Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Rachel is a great source. And that's from my one day meeting her. But yeah, solastalgia, it's a term, it's a psychological response to like the degradation of one's home. So unlike nostalgia, where you're kind of looking back, it's like you're kind of like dreading this, altered connection with your place because it's not going to be the same. Yeah, so that's a term that we use a lot in our field regarding mental health and climate change. And then, of course, eco-anxiety is pretty self-explanatory. It's increasingly recognized. I feel like every time you go to any news source, they're talking about eco-anxiety in several different fronts. And I, just want to emphasize that in our field, we don't like to pathologize anxiety regarding the climate because it's a normal response to have. And all of those emotions that you guys are feeling, there's no right way to feel about climate change. And we think eco-anxiety, is generally a very productive and constructive feeling to have. And it's obviously what motivates us to be at places like we are today and be with communities that we are today. Yeah. And oops, sorry, I didn't do this one too. This was a paper. I also just want to highlight how it's also affecting our young people too, and how it's so important for us to address our emotions in climate change because it affects, our future generations. This is a photo of Juliana and her crew. You guys have heard of Juliana versus the US. Who sued the government. This is, I think, when they were like pretty young, and it's interesting now because they're all like little blossoming adults now. But this paper, Climate Anxiety in Young People, it was a big deal. It was in the Lancet in 2021, and Caroline Hickman, who's head of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance in the UK, led this research paper of they surveyed 10,000 youth over 10 different countries. And basically, they found that, our adolescents, the majority of adolescents are just really having a sense of threat of their world and their communities. And it's really important because they rely on family and societal constructs like the government and school to help them navigate through this. But we just don't really see that happening. So yeah, like 84%, at least moderately worried about climate change. 45%, it's just like a big number, feels that climate change negatively affects their functioning. And 75% think the future is frightening with regards to climate change. And it's just like really tough, I think, to swallow that when this problem is so big. And then I think sorry, I keep forgetting to do the double thing. And then I think, further complicate things is how climate change is so entrenched in other huge issues like structural racism and inequality. We know that these vulnerable populations experience climate change effects first and worse, especially BIPOC and Indigenous communities. And then we have the elderly, people with disabilities, so lower socioeconomic status. So all of these factors play into how climate change is addressed as well. I mean, we see in Florida, people who could not leave were in these age group, or sorry, in these in these groups, and it's just like really sad to see. And it feels like nothing has changed since Katrina, because Katrina was kind of the same thing, and it's been over 20 years since that happened. So. Is it 20 years? Almost 20 years. Okay. That's 20 years. Okay. Wow, I did not do the math in my head. It's been a long time. I really liked this paper. It's from the Journal of Climate Change and Health, but it's just basically a call to action that addresses, it kind of like looks back on how we addressed the COVID pandemic. Saying even with the most advanced technology, creating the vaccine within a year, there was still just so much disparity among the distribution of healthcare and resources, and attributed that to this construct of structural racism, and how if we don't address this within our own institutions, that we can't move forward in climate change as well. Yeah, this is just a quote that I thought was really good from the paper, but since you guys may not be able to read it, I'll just read it out loud. It's a little long, so I apologize. But it says, to achieve equitable climate solutions, we must look inward to successfully move forward. We must look critically at our institutions of healthcare and government if we want to achieve long-lasting equitable progress. As structural racism has historically disempowered millions in this country and made so many communities disproportionately vulnerable to climate change, then our healthcare solutions must be centered upon empowerment. And I don't think that's just a focus on healthcare solutions. I think it should be broader than that as well. So I'm going to switch to activism and burnout, which some of you guys may have experienced as well. I found this paper, it's from 2019 from Paul Gorski, who's a psychologist and actually studies burnout, particularly in racial activists. And he did a paper where he evaluated several racial activists. He's based in Georgia, and identified like 4 main causes of burnout. And I thought it was actually applicable to a broad range of activism, especially since they're also intertwined. The first is emotional dispositional, where it's like you have this feeling of profound personal responsibility to for the cause that you're working towards. I think we all feel that. I definitely have felt this before. And I think it relates to the third cause as well, which is structural. And it's the challenge of creating change in a very unyielding culture. And then 2 is backlash and safety. And so I think, I was kind of thinking about this for a while. I know climate activism itself has always been at heads with, especially with smaller communities, I think people's livelihoods. And, I think there can be a lot of tension within these communities. And also we live in the age of TikTok and Instagram and information access. And so it is easier to access people's information. And that does seem to be like a pretty more common way of how to like expose people or get people's personal information. And that can be taxing as well, especially if you're, if you have like a target on your back all the time, or if you live in a community that is smaller and yeah. And then the 4th is in movement. And so when you're working in an organization and you're having a lot of ego clashes, and it's more like competition overriding the collaboration, and you just kind of lose focus of your ultimate goal, and it can just seem very taxing. I don't know if any of you guys could identify with any of those, but yeah, I thought those were good things to bring up. And activism burnout can like dampen movements. It can, cause, attrition. But I think if we know what the risk factors are, then there's less chance of that. And the conclusion from this article that I thought was really good too is how we need to address this not individually, but more as a collective group, and figuring out ways to identify these issues and move forward together, because that's going to help in the long run for your cause and in burnout. And so, how do we cope with all of these emotions we're feeling? One thing that we at the Climate Psychiatry Alliance talk about a lot is meaning-focused coping. And it's relevant when a problem cannot be removed. We know climate change is going to be an ongoing issue. So how do we deal with all of these negative emotions all the time, or these, roller coaster? And this helps us encourage active involvement over time and creating an experience of profound empathy with our relationship with climate change. And it's essentially a refusal to shut the self away from the suffering of the natural world and fellow human beings. And so I'm going to go further and talk about transformational resilience. So transformational resilience is a growth model that enhances meaning-focused coping. And there's kind of like two big categories that transformational resilience goes on, and it uses the acronym GROWTH. And so the GRO is under the category of presencing skills. I think it's knowing how to calm your body, find your inner peace and mind in adversity, and drawing upon the strengths that you have, which maybe the colors can allude to. And then the second is purposing, which you guys are kind of doing, it's kind of finding community and watching for growth, and then also like using your imagination to see and activate hope. And so all of these future slides come from the Transformational Resilience slide deck, and the original slide deck has like many, many slides. And so I just picked a few just to kind of give like a good intro, and I'm sure Rachel will give more talk on that tomorrow. But essentially, this is very important for climate change. And, the saying here, I'll just read it out loud. So the ability to constructively cope with climate and other adversities and use them as catalysts to learn, grow, and increase personal, social, and ecological well-being substantially above pre-crisis levels. And this is from the presencing slide deck. And I really like this. It literally takes all the things that calm you from your core to the outside. And so you kind of grow. And it's actually, I was thinking about this earlier, and, we do like suicide safety assessments at my work. And it kind of does a little bit like that, where you kind of like create a safety plan and like recognizing and identifying things that calm you and give you peace, and something that you can refer back to when you are feeling very overwhelmed. So it starts at, my personal skills, what calms me? Is it exercise? Do you read? Do you do any form of art? Is like make the perfect pancake or cookie. I don't make either. So yeah, like what grounds you on the inside? And then you look at internal support. So images of experiences and places, any role models that bring peace and calm. For me, I think of like all the times that I visit Florence this past summer. I went on some really amazing hikes this past summer, and reflecting on those experiences and places just like really make me happy. Social support. Pretty self-explanatory. Obviously have a really good social support group right here, and then friends and family too. Um, and then external support, so any physical places. It can be a room in your home that you like, a garden, backyard, and then you go into the ecological supports, like what in the environment brings you peace and calm. After moving back from Southern California, it's clean air and the tap water. Love the tap water, love the clean air, love clouds. And then I love my city's green spaces. I live like 5 minutes away from a park, and I just love going there with my dog. Yeah, so just something to reflect upon as you kind of like move through. And then I'm gonna skip ahead to the purposing steps here. So I really like the purposing because I think not often enough we are not really given any guidance on how to hope or cultivate hope, and with topics like this. And I think it really encourages you to use your imagination. And that's kind of how ideas are made, and that's how growth is made. And this prompt is essentially, telling a new story and creating a vision of your best possible self. And so the prompt here is, I think you can imagine a certain situation. It could be something as simple as, feeling that you overcommitted to a certain amount of projects. Imagine that you go to sleep tonight and something magical happens, and you're suddenly able to think and respond to distressing events in the ideal way you would like to, that helps you and avoids harm to yourself, the natural environment, and allows you to live a life with dignity and pride. And so, what would you do in a situation where you may be overcommitted to a lot of projects that you feel like a lot of pressures on you and a lot of people are depending on you? Would that mean setting boundaries? Would that mean setting help or recruiting for help? And then how can you bring that ideal to fruition? And then, taking control of how you respond. And this just emphasizes that with hope, there are, some key ingredients here. I think one of them is having the vision, like I said, like the imagination of, a place that you want to arrive or a condition you want to achieve. I feel like the last two are really good too, because it emphasizes community and that and reaching out to others. So a sense of the initial steps you can take or an overall approach to move towards this vision. I feel like, doing this you can do alone, but in a group setting like this, you have a lot of people with a lot of wide life experiences and skill sets, and we should really utilize each other for that and goals that we want to achieve. And then a commitment to work with others toward that vision, even when obstacles arise. And then I think this brings us to my last point. And I really like this term, internal activism. I don't know if anyone has heard of the Gen Dread Substack series. Yeah, it's written by Britt Ray. She's a psychologist as well, and she writes these really amazing short articles on feelings about climate change, writes a lot on eco-anxiety, and she went to this Climate Psychiatry Alliance workshop with Caroline Hickman. She said she stayed up 12 hours overnight for it because of the time difference. But I really appreciate the notes. Essentially, we feel like we need to hold on to this immense existential pressure all the time. And she also really emphasizes that despair and hope are not inherently bad feelings. And hope and optimism aren't inherently good feelings. And like I said, we don't like to pathologize what we're feeling about climate change. and how we need to grow up in cultivating our imagination, determined and hopeful capacities, and also grow down into building our tolerance for guilt, shame, anxiety, and depression. And that's what makes us deeper human beings. And she essentially, the point of this is that activism isn't the cure-all for eco-anxiety, because if we just do activism and not approach where we are at emotionally, it refuses the painful process of integrating dark emotions into our life that emotional intelligence requires. And we become less flexible with how we feel, and that's also what leads to burnout. And so when we can kind of figure out ways to maybe ride that roller coaster, then that's when growth happens. Yeah. And I just wanted to list a few resources. This is a very short list. It's not as extensive as some other slides that I've seen. But I'm part of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance. There are two climate psychology institutes, both in the UK and North America. And then there is an organization called Climate Awakening, and they host climate cafes in North America. Climate Psychiatry Alliance UK does as well. I'm not sure about North America, but yeah, I have not gone to a climate cafe yet because of scheduling issues, but it is just a safe space for people to talk about their climate emotions and share that with others. I know that you guys are kind of all spread among the Pacific Northwest, but it can feel like very isolating to just have these emotions. Yeah, and then also the Gen Dread Substack from Britt Ray, highly recommend. If it's just like an email that comes out, and the articles are very short and easy to read. And so just conclusions, hope some things that you that have come across is eco-anxiety and all these feelings that you're feeling about climate the crisis, they're not pathological, they're very appropriate for what's going on in our world. And that community resilience enhances individual resilience, and really just meet yourself at and embrace all the feelings, and just be kind to yourself and be easy on yourself and others. Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge my mentors and my colleagues at the Climate Psychiatry Alliance who have been very helpful and in my community and giving me information and teaching me all of this. And yeah, and also my partner Zane, who did a dry run with me yesterday. Yeah, any questions? Yes, in the microphone? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay, okay. Yes. I'm not. So the question was if there's been any research on how media has played a role in eco-anxiety. Not that I know of. I did meet a researcher who studied how youth activists, climate activists are portrayed in the media. And so I would be pretty interested actually in finding that out, because I do wonder about that as well. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Sorry, I don't have an answer. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering what the first bullet point meant. I'm sorry, where it says eco-anxiety should not be pathologized.
Yeah, so eco-anxiety shouldn't be viewed as like something like general anxiety disorder or a different type of anxiety thing that should be like worked on. I think we should accept these feelings and kind of work it essentially kind of like separates eco-anxiety from other types of anxiety, at least in our field. Yeah. It's not abnormal. Yeah.
A lot of anxiety is like an overreaction, and that's like, you know, owning your reaction a little bit, versus eco anxiety is like pretty appropriate reaction to the world that we're finding ourselves in. So you can feel like you have a medical device.
Can we go back one slide?
Oh, okay.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
I was wondering what your thoughts were on the role that organizations like Surfrider should play in addressing eco-anxiety and providing support for their members.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, what organization like Surfrider can do to address eco-anxiety and sorry, what was the
Provide support to
provide support to members. You know, that's a good question. I feel like I think creating, I mean, I think any first step is just creating like a safe space, I think, for people to check in, like maybe like how we did earlier. And also maybe a safe space to, you know, I know like I had listed the things for burnout, you know, if people are feeling burned out, you know, a place for them to be honest or maybe anonymous, and maybe addressing some of those issues if they can identify them. Yeah. Yeah.
Similar question. We have this sort of internal discussion. Do you have any insight or resources you can recommend when it comes to framing things for public consumption and walking that line between that crisis framing that can be very demotivating and like which conservation has extremely sound effect, versus, you know, not taking like making sure that the critical nature of this work, the deadlines that we're on, are still portrayed in a way that's, you know, actually inspiring instead of motivating.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to try and repeat that. So the question was about how to, I'm so sorry.
Crisis without
Message.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
without making eco-anxiety worse.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I'll emphasize is just how to allow place for like creativity and imagination, and using like positive visualization to address it. I know it's like, and also I think acknowledging that it is going to be a heavy subject and that we're going to have to deal with, you know, the negative emotions that arise with addressing this, and also like in failures as well, right? You know, like not every bill that you like put up is going to get passed, and you're going to have to, it's going to feel like a setback, right? And people are going to be really demotivated and feeling hopeless, and yeah, I think you know, I think figuring out like smaller ways to cultivate hope, whether that's, you know, some sort of creative exercise or just giving space to, I think, like process what happened as a group, and then seeing what you can do to look forward to the future. And I think, you know, setting those goals as reasonable, you know, I think keeping in mind that, you know, I think just in general, like for any organization, of like what is achievable within the amount of time that you want to achieve it. Yeah. Even if it's just like a small goal, I think in the long run, all of this progress is going to add up, and you're going to see it as you reflect back on all the work that you did. Oh. Yeah, yeah.
So we have Charlotte from Seattle.
Uh-huh.
Question about work being integrated into activism.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, but I think that's a good thing to bring back to the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, because I feel like this is going to be, normally our our educational materials, I think, are more geared towards physicians and then non-healthcare people. But I think this, as I'm thinking about this now, it gives us more space to, I think, maybe address some of this stuff like this and creating guidance on how to address our emotional states within activist groups. Yeah. 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 Uh-huh.
My takeaway was that it's important to group, and that seems like that is important for us.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like we're collectively
Yeah.
really express our mind.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for that commentary. Yeah. So I mean, it was just addressing that, it sounds like Surfrider addresses this collectively as well as individually. And that's why, we think this is a good organization, and keeping the big picture always in mind of like the ultimate goal, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I'm curious to hear how you think your work specifically in this space may evolve as the impacts of climate change become more pronounced. Like it seems like things get more precipitous every year.
Yeah.
There's lots of realize, but then there's all these anomalies, and so as things become more pronounced, how do you see your work change?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think in general right now it's not addressed enough in my specialty. OHSU I think has a pretty strong presence within the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, but it's still a very, very small community on our end as well. And so we're still learning how to grow and how to educate other providers that this is actually like a really big thing that is going to be coming in our patient population. They're going to come in and they're going to say, my home was destroyed, or my environment is being destroyed. So like addressing the very short-term disasters and then also the long-term effects. And what we do is, I think outside of eco-anxiety and grief, the effects of climate change on our patient population as a whole just gets bigger, right? It exacerbates mental health crises, suicidality, PTSD. People with psychosis like schizophrenia can have like a lot of decompensation, and a lot of medications that people are on are affected by heat. They're not as effective in heat, and then they also, some medications affect thermoregulation. And so I think we're on, we normally give more talks to physician groups to alert them that this is kind of an impending thing, and trying to just, I think, cultivate, I think, at least interest or acknowledgement that this is going to be a bigger issue. Yeah.
Thank you. A quick follow-up to that is, sounds like you're capacity to receive space. How can organizations like Surfrider support build that literacy, expand this landscape?
Yeah, well, I think you're doing it now by highlighting it during your conference. And I feel like this is maybe just this is the second organization that I've spoken for. And I think it's really great that you guys are really highlighting, mental health. And yeah, I feel like it's very important. And yeah, just spread the word, and hopefully we can, get out there and, talk about this and figure out ways to build resilience among you guys. And then also, yeah, getting the word that, yeah, mental health is a big issue.
Inspired, like, last two, like, chapters, I guess, kind of the facilitator role, like, but like, actually creating,
Yeah.
like, what do we got, like, are there facilitators rather than creating materials?
Yeah. I
That we are more competent in.
Yeah, I feel like with one of the resources I gave, at least with Climate Awakening, oh my gosh, Climate Psychology Alliance, is like the climate cafes. And I don't really know to what capacity. I mean, they're free cafes, but I feel like one of my next goals is to actually, go to one and figure out how they're facilitated. And, I think, the Climate Psychiatry Alliance doesn't do any like facilitated groups, but I think maybe reaching out to other organizations that may do that. I think that would be like a really good, a good way to at least start. Yeah. Yeah. That's okay.
But how do we have events to try and get volunteers to, have, share their vision and great ideas. Big ideas. Actually, like, do that.
Yeah.
Energy, but then sort of ask you support today.
Yeah, so question is, so like sometimes the vision gets too big and then you feel like you kind of have to backtrack and how to cultivate that going forward. I mean, I feel like, I think one of the steps was like creating initial steps to go to that vision. And so I think maybe taking that vision and dividing it up into like smaller goals, and then taking initial steps from there and breaking it down. So, the goal is always there, right? But then in the process, you'd create like other little goals too. Yeah. Anyone else? All right, thanks everyone.
So that was wonderful. And thank you for all of your super amazing questions. I just wanted to say a few things. I hope we can continue working with Dr. Jen. She lives in Portland, so all you Portland folks. Liz and I have talked a lot about this, and you'll kind of see throughout the conference with like the slug love. Rachel is also going to be kind of closing us out tomorrow with some more mindfulness, wellness, so that we're leaving the conference with that as a reminder. Some of you have participated in our book club that we've done, which like is kind of like Liz and I creating the safe space for chapters. And so we read All We Can Save, which is like this really amazing climate change. Yeah. Anthology of feminist climate warriors. And so, if there's interest in doing the book club again, we had a very small group, but it's like really amazing. And for me, sometimes I'd be like, I didn't read. And then I'm like, trying to speed read and then get into the book club and we're chatting and it's this like amazing supportive environment. And I feel so wonderful after it, even though sometimes we're talking about like super heavy stuff. So think about like, in your chapter culture, like how you can create that safe space. If it's a capacity check-in during exec, if you're going to have like a happy hour, like maybe you're going to do your meeting outside instead of inside, or, there are small things that you can do. So just kind of think about that, how you can build it into your culture. And think about capacity. Like we want you all thinking about your capacity this whole weekend and staying within your capacity, because that's like what we see as a huge factor in burnout for Surfrider is like there's so much to do and we want to do it all and it's like fun and we're saving the world, but like also if we're Yeah, I need a nap. If you're not taking care of yourself, like if you're trained as a first responder, like number one rule, don't create another victim. You take care of yourself and don't put yourself in harm's way, because then someone is going to have to come rescue you and the rest of the people. And like, I think we need to think more like that in our work so that we're not like getting so burnt out. So please, please think about your capacity and like staying within that, because it gets exciting at the conference. You're like, we're going to do all these things, and we go back, and then it's like, it's too much. Zakia, did we have a question in chat? Oh, thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Drew.
I'm glad you were there.
And sort of jumping on the book club and what Bree said, and Stina, to your question, if there are resources, like part of this conference goal is not for us to tell you things. It's for us to hear you and listen to you, and to get you thinking about what you need from us that we can provide. And so if it's like training to help facilitate this type of work that Dr. Jen talked about, please let us know. We can, like, that is our job, is to help support you guys. And our primary goal is to enable you and equip you with those tools to keep doing the work that is Surfrider. That is our mission. So,
And we are going to have some extra room in our budget that we talked to Ed about using for additional training. So there might, yes,
you get a training and you get a training.
but maybe we can like custom, like work with Dr. Jen and like custom design something for our chapters, or maybe with the NOVA, which is like professional volunteer managers, and I can't remember what their acronym stands for, but like maybe we can custom develop something with them for Cascadia chapter. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind too, that we do have some additional resources that we can do some more trainings with you all.
Question, Mike. Ryan.
Ryan.
This is all about us and you. Yeah. What about the youth? I mean, that's my experience, is the youth. You know, when you grabbed onto that, it was, oh, well, where is it now?
The youth?
What about the
Where
youth?
is it supported? I just don't see it.
Ryan.
I don't see it where I am.
The question was, what about youth?
Yeah.
I mean, so I can say that certainly like eco-anxiety, worries and frustrations with all this is very front of mind for them. And so I think it is really important that we kind of figure this out in a way that, you know, supports all of our network. I think it's important for chapters, but definitely for the youth. You know, one thing that I was thinking, I think it's actually really cool. We still have so many students that want to get involved, not as much here in the, you know, in Washington, Oregon, unfortunately, but even with the like, oh my God, this is dreadful. This is really scary. This is a really hard thing as a young person. They're still coming to us and being like, I want to get involved, which is awesome. And so I think we need to meet them and make sure that we're supporting that like passion and helping them through that.
I would just add to that, that something that Surfrider has that most other organizations don't have is that deep community aspect, right? That where people come to Surfrider because they're looking for community and connection. And the work that we just heard about is so tied to that and building that. And so the more that we can reinforce that and create space for that community, enjoying being together, supporting each other, like the more we build, right?
Fun.
One thing the Olympia chapter did years ago was reach out to the high schools, and a lot of the high schools in Olympia have climate action clubs. And so we have been invited into the schools, and part of it helps because I was a teacher for over 17 years. So I kind of can sneak in to different grade levels, but that winds up being a really cool thing, is partnering and doing things with the local high school groups. And when they have their climate marches, we're always there documenting and being there for them. And I think it really helps them see and be a part of an organization that gets stuff done. So they learn then from us about the legislative work and the beach cleanups and the data that's collected. And I think that helps.